It is never the first fight that does it. It is never one single dramatic betrayal that makes a person finally decide to step back from their own family, sometimes permanently. It is years, sometimes decades, of a slow, quiet erosion, being asked to shrink, being asked to apologize for things that were never actually their fault, being asked to keep showing up for people who never once had to change in order to keep receiving them. And then, one day, often to everyone else's genuine shock, this person simply stops. No dramatic explosion, just a quiet final decision that this particular door is now closed. Carl Jung had a real and genuinely important explanation for why this decision, however painful and however judged by everyone watching from outside, is so often the healthiest thing this specific person has ever done. Jung believed that genuine individuation, becoming fully and authentically yourself, sometimes requires separating from relationships that demand you remain a smaller, earlier version of who you actually are, even when those relationships are technically blood family. A family system built around one person consistently absorbing blame, consistently managing everyone else's feelings, consistently shrinking themselves to keep the peace, is not a system that will simply change because that person finally asks it to. It is a system that has, often for years, depended entirely on this specific person, continuing to play exactly the same role, and stepping back from it is not an act of coldness. It is often the only way this person can actually become who they were always capable of being. This explains why the decision to step back so rarely happens quickly, and why it is so often misunderstood by people outside the situation who only see one side of an entire, complicated history. Cutting off family is not usually the reaction to one bad moment. It is usually the final, considered response to a pattern that repeated for years, one where every attempt to address it honestly was met with the exact same dismissal, defensiveness, or return to business as usual, until stepping back became the only remaining option left for genuine self-protection. If you are the person who has made this decision, or who is currently considering it, hear this clearly. This choice does not make you cold, ungrateful, or a bad person, regardless of how loudly anyone else insists otherwise. According to Jung's understanding, walking away from a relationship that consistently required you to be smaller than you actually are is not a betrayal of family. It is often the first real act of genuine self-respect this specific relationship had ever actually allowed you to have. Here is what actually matters if you are living through this. It helps to be honest with yourself about the difference between a relationship genuinely worth continuing to work on and one that has shown you, repeatedly and consistently, that it will not actually change no matter how many honest attempts you have already made. This distinction deserves real careful thought rather than either impulsive action or indefinite exhausted tolerance of something that has already proven over years that it is not going to shift. Think honestly about your own family relationships and consider whether any of them have consistently required you to shrink, apologize, or manage everyone else's feelings at the genuine expense of your own, despite repeated honest attempts to address this directly. Right below the single word for what you have had to give up the most in order to remain fully welcome in that particular relationship. Naming it honestly is the real and necessary first step toward deciding clearly and for yourself whether this relationship is one worth continuing to fight for, or one that has already told you repeatedly exactly what it actually requires from you. Because stepping back from family that consistently required you to be smaller than you actually are was never, according to Carl Jung's understanding, an act of coldness or ingratitude. It was very often the first genuine act of self-respect a relationship like that had ever actually allowed to exist.